Have you ever paused and wondered if Buddhism teaches there is no permanent self? Then who exactly is reborn? It's a question I've heard countless times throughout my years studying Buddhism. In fact, it's one of those intriguing puzzles that both beginners and seasoned practitioners grapple with, often quietly and sometimes openly. You see, Buddhism presents us with a fascinating paradox. On one hand, the Buddha clearly taught the doctrine of Anatta, or no self, that beneath all our thoughts, emotions, and sensations, there isn't any permanent, unchanging essence we can call our own. On the other hand, Buddhism also firmly emphasizes the principle of rebirth, the continuity of life beyond death, where one's karmic actions determine future existences. How do these seemingly contradictory ideas fit together? If there's no eternal soul or enduring self, then who exactly moves from one life to another? Throughout my decades of researching, studying, and teaching Buddhism, I've found that this exact paradox is not merely an intellectual curiosity. It actually opens a profound gateway into deeper understanding, insight, and even faith. From the countless stories, teachings, and meditations shared by ancient sages to the explanations provided by contemporary Buddhist masters, I've discovered that the answer to this question lies at the heart of what Buddhism seeks to convey: the true nature of reality, impermanence, and interconnectedness. Today, and I'd like to invite you on a journey with me. Together, we will unravel this fascinating puzzle. We will explore the rich tapestry of Buddhist wisdom, listen to compelling stories from Buddhist texts, and reflect on insights offered by renowned teachers. By examining how rebirth can happen without a permanent self, we won't just satisfy our intellectual curiosity, we'll also cultivate a deeper trust and appreciation for the profound teachings of the Buddha. As we step into this exploration, keep an open heart and mind, because sometimes when we think we're asking questions about abstract philosophy, we're actually opening doors to personal transformation, spiritual growth, and greater peace. Let's begin our journey. Section 1. Understanding the concept of self in Buddhism. Let's begin by talking clearly and simply about what Buddhism means by the idea of no self. Also known as anatta, it might sound a bit confusing at first because our entire lives, we've believed there is a constant, permanent me inside us, someone who never changes. But according to the Buddha, that idea of a permanent self is actually an illusion. Now you might say, wait a minute, of course, there's a self. I have memories, experiences, a family, and friends who recognize me. And that's completely understandable. But Buddhism doesn't deny your experiences or memories. Instead, it explains something deeper. Everything about us is continuously changing, so nothing stays the same forever. Let me give you an easy example. Think about a river. From a distance, the river looks the same every day. But when you look closely, every drop of water is constantly moving. Today's river is not yesterday's river. Our lives are exactly like that river. We feel like there's something constant, something permanent within us, but really, everything is always flowing, shifting, and evolving. The Buddha explained that what we call our self is made up of 5 changing parts. These are called the 5 aggregates. Let me explain them simply. First, there's form, which is your physical body. Our bodies change over time. Right, we age, our hair turns gray, our faces wrinkle. This shows clearly there is nothing permanent in our form. Next, we have feelings, which include happiness, sadness, pleasure, and pain. Think about how your feelings change during the day. You might feel happy one moment, then worried the next. Those feelings come and go. They don't stay forever. Third is perceptions, the way we recognize and interpret things around us. Our perceptions change too, like when you see something differently than you did years ago. Fourth is mental formations. These include our habits, our thoughts, and emotions. They constantly shift and grow throughout our lives, influenced by experiences. Lastly, there's consciousness, which is simply our awareness. Even consciousness isn't permanent. It shifts with our thoughts and experiences. When you look at these 5 parts carefully, you'll see that none of them remains unchanged forever. So Buddhism says because each part of what we call self keeps changing, there's no fixed, permanent self at all. Understanding this can actually bring us a deep sense of freedom and peace. Because when you realize there's no permanent self, you can let go of attachments and regrets more easily, accepting life exactly as it comes. Section 2, the nature of rebirth in Buddhism. Now, this brings us to another fascinating point, rebirth. Many of you have probably heard about rebirth or reincarnation before. You might even think they mean the same thing. But in Buddhism, rebirth isn't exactly like reincarnation. It doesn't involve a soul traveling from one body to another. Instead, rebirth in Buddhism is more like passing a flame from one candle to another. Let me illustrate this clearly. Imagine you have a candle burning brightly. Now, you use that flame to light another candle. The flame moves from the first candle to the second. But the second candle's flame isn't the same flame, nor is it completely different. The first flame didn't jump entirely onto the new candle, but it caused the new flame to arise. Buddhism sees rebirth in the same way there is continuity, but no permanent soul or self passing from life to life. According to Buddhism, what actually continues from one life to another is our karmic energy. Think of karma as actions and intentions. Every thought, word, or action creates an impression or influence that continues beyond this life. If we live our lives kindly, compassionately, and generously, those actions create positive karmic energy. This positive energy influences future conditions, shaping our rebirth. Conversely, if our actions cause harm or suffering, negative karmic energy arises, affecting the conditions of future lives. You might wonder, if there's no permanent self, who exactly is reborn and experiences the consequences of karma? Buddhism explains this clearly by showing that while there is no fixed identity moving forward, there is a continuous flow or stream of consciousness influenced by past actions. Remember our river example. Imagine that river flowing continuously, shaping its path based on what's happened upstream. Similarly, our lives are influenced by past actions, shaping the conditions into which we're reborn. There's a lovely old Buddhist story that helps illustrate rebirth. Once, a king asked a wise Buddhist monk, "If there's no permanent self, who will receive the consequences of my actions?" The monk replied gently, "Think about planting a mango seed. The tree that grows is not exactly the seed, but without the seed, the tree wouldn't exist. In the same way, the person you are in this life plants seeds through your actions, and these seeds grow into future lives." Understanding rebirth in this way is comforting and empowering. It shows us clearly that our lives have meaning and impact. Even without a permanent self, we can always choose to plant better seeds to live with kindness, wisdom, and compassion, knowing that these actions help shape a brighter future, not just for ourselves, but for others as well. As we continue exploring together, we'll see how deeply interconnected all of this is, and how beautifully Buddhism addresses these profound questions about who we are and how our lives unfold. Section 3, Resolving the Paradox. No permanent self, yet rebirth happens now. Let's continue on our journey and talk more deeply about the paradox that Buddhism presents. How can rebirth happen if there's no permanent self? It might seem confusing at first, but Buddhism offers a beautiful and comforting way to understand this. Let's go back for a moment to the example of the candle flame. Imagine you have a candle burning gently. When the candle is about to burn out, you take another candle and use the first flame to light it. What happens? The flame passes from the first candle to the second candle. But here's the important thing: are the two flames exactly the same? Not really, but are they completely separate? Not that either. The second flame arises directly from the first flame, and yet each is unique. This is exactly how Buddhism explains rebirth without a permanent self. Each moment of our life is like the flame on a candle. It appears because of the moment before it, and it influences the moment after it. There's continuity, but no single flame stays constant. Our lives flow forward moment to moment, continuously changing, influenced by everything we think, say and do. The Buddha explained this using the teaching of dependent origination, or what we might call the interconnectedness of everything. Dependent origination means that nothing happens without a cause, and everything is connected to something before it. Think about your life today. It's the result of many past choices, decisions, and experiences. Right. Similarly, the life we're experiencing now helps shape future lives, creating a continuous flow, even without a fixed self. I'd like to share another simple example. Think of a stream flowing downhill. The water you see today isn't exactly the same water you saw yesterday. It's always moving, always changing, yet because of the stream bed and surroundings, the water keeps flowing along the same general path. Our lives are like that stream. They continue forward because of the conditions created by our past actions, even though no single part remains exactly the same from one moment to the next. What this means practically is quite wonderful. Understanding there's no permanent self, yet seeing clearly the continuity in our lives, helps us let go of unnecessary attachments. We don't have to hold tightly onto everything because we realize everything changes naturally. Instead, we can focus on creating good conditions through kindness and compassion, helping ourselves and others to experience greater peace. Section 4, Karmic Energy. What exactly transfers now? We've spoken a lot about karma, and maybe you're asking yourself, what exactly is this karmic energy, and how does it move from one life to another? Let's talk about this clearly, step by step, because it's really important to our understanding of rebirth. Karma, simply put, means action. Every single thing we think, say, or do is an action that leaves an impression. It's like dropping a small stone into a quiet pond. The stone creates ripples that spread out in all directions. These ripples represent how our actions influence our lives and the lives of those around us. Karma isn't about punishment or reward. It's about natural consequences. If you plant a mango seed, you'll get a mango tree, not an apple tree. If you plant kindness and generosity, you'll receive kindness and generosity back in one form or another. Similarly, negative actions, such as anger or dishonesty, create negative outcomes. But how does this karmic energy travel from life to life if there's no permanent self? Buddhism explains that karmic energy continues as a kind of momentum, like the force that keeps a wheel turning. Imagine pushing a wheel down a gentle slope. Once it starts moving, it keeps rolling forward due to its momentum. Karmic energy is similar. It continues from moment to moment, life to life, not because there's a fixed self, but because each action influences future moments and conditions. Let me share a simple Buddhist story to illustrate this clearly. Once, a wise teacher was asked by his students, if there's no permanent self who experiences the effects of karma, the teacher smiled gently and said, imagine a string of pearls. Each pearl is separate, yet all connected by the same thread. Our lives are like those pearls, each life separate, yet connected by karmic energy. The thread. Thread, this karmic energy, is what continues from one life to the next. When our current life ends, the energy created by our actions doesn't just disappear, it shapes the conditions of the next life, much like the momentum of the rolling wheel. Understanding this helps us live better lives right now. It encourages us to choose kindness over cruelty, generosity over greed, patience over anger, because every good action creates positive karmic energy, benefiting us and others, now and in future lives. In Buddhism, the goal is not just understanding these concepts intellectually, but deeply feeling their truth and allowing them to guide our everyday decisions. When we realize the powerful impact of our actions, we naturally begin living with more awareness, compassion, and wisdom, creating a better future for ourselves and everyone around us. Section 5, Consciousness in the Stream of Becoming Now. Let's talk about consciousness, the sense of awareness you have each day. Consciousness is simply that part of us that knows we're alive, awake, and experiencing the world around us. Buddhism sees consciousness not as something fixed or permanent, but rather as a flowing stream, always moving and changing. You might ask, what does this really mean? Let's think of consciousness like a continuous flow of water in a stream, always fresh, always moving forward. Just like you never step into the exact same river twice, your consciousness is never exactly the same from one moment to the next. Your thoughts, feelings, memories, they come and go, constantly shaping and reshaping your awareness. But here's the important part. Even though consciousness keeps changing, it's not random. It moves forward in a connected way, shaped by our past actions, experiences, and habits. Our decisions, our behaviors, even our smallest thoughts influence this flow. The good things we do, say, or even think guide this consciousness toward peaceful, positive experiences. Negative actions, of course, steer it toward difficulty and suffering. Let me share a story that helps us see this clearly. Imagine sitting quietly beside a flowing stream. You toss small leaves into the water and watch them drift downstream. Each leaf represents a thought, an action, or a feeling. Once released, each leaf travels downstream, influencing what comes next. This is exactly how our consciousness works. It carries along everything we've done, felt, and thought, influencing each moment as we move through life. When a person's life ends, Buddhism explains, this flow of consciousness doesn't just stop. Instead, it's like the stream flowing into a new landscape, taking with it the momentum from all that came before. There's no permanent soul or self jumping into a new body, only the continuation of this flowing consciousness, influenced by past karma and shaping new experiences. Understanding consciousness this way helps us appreciate the deep connections between each moment of our lives. It teaches us to be mindful, thoughtful, and careful in how we live each day, because every action we take shapes not only our current life, but the conditions of the life that follows. Section 6. Lessons on Faith from Understanding Rebirth and No Self Now. Let's turn to something really beautiful, how understanding these deep teachings about rebirth and no self can strengthen our faith. Faith in Buddhism isn't blind belief. Instead, it's trust and confidence built upon understanding and experience. When we deeply grasp these teachings, our faith grows stronger, guiding us through life's challenges with greater ease and comfort. When I first encountered these ideas decades ago, I admit I was skeptical. Maybe you're feeling that way too. But as I studied, meditated, and reflected, I realized how powerful these insights are. Buddhism's teachings about rebirth and the absence of a permanent self teach us something truly comforting. Life is fluid, constantly renewing itself. Nothing is ever completely lost, and nothing harmful has to stay forever. This understanding brings us hope and freedom, knowing that our lives continuously flow forward, influenced by our good deeds, encourages us to act with kindness, generosity, and wisdom. We begin to feel deeply connected to all beings, recognizing that our actions ripple outward and affect many others. Let me share a lovely Buddhist story about faith. There was once an elderly woman who regularly offered food to monks passing by her home. She didn't fully understand deep Buddhist teachings, but she had tremendous faith and kindness. One day, a monk asked her, "Do you worry about what will happen after you pass away?" She smiled gently and replied, "Why should I worry? Each day I plant seeds of kindness. I trust those seeds will blossom beautifully, wherever they grow next." Her faith was simple but profound. She understood deeply without complicated words or ideas that her good actions created positive conditions for the future. She didn't cling to a permanent self. She trusted the natural flow of life, knowing her kindness would carry forward beyond her own lifetime. We can all learn from her example, understanding that there's no permanent self, yet believing in the natural continuity of karmic energy helps us trust life deeply. It gives us comfort and purpose, knowing every small act of kindness or generosity will bear fruit, influencing our present and future lives in wonderful ways. As we reflect on these teachings together, we can strengthen our own faith. Trusting this natural flow brings peace and acceptance, guiding us to live happier, more compassionate lives, moment by moment. Section 7. Practical Implications. living life with the awareness of Anatta now. We've talked a lot about the Buddhist idea of no self, rebirth, and consciousness. But you might be wondering, how does all this affect my daily life? How can I use these teachings practically? That's a wonderful question because Buddhism is deeply practical. It's meant to help us live happier, more peaceful lives every single day. When you truly understand there's no permanent self, life becomes lighter. Think about all the stress and worries we carry every day. Worries about health, family, money, and even aging. Many of these worries arise because we're attached to things staying the same. We fear losing what we have, or we struggle against inevitable changes. But Buddhism teaches us gently and kindly, nothing stays the same forever. And rather than being something sad or frightening, this impermanence can actually become a comforting truth. When we understand deeply that everything changes our bodies, our feelings, our circumstances, we learn to let go a little bit. We stop gripping tightly onto the past or worrying too much about the future, and we learn to appreciate the present moment more fully. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine you're holding a small bird gently in your hand. If you grip it too tightly, you'll hurt it. But if you hold it softly, allowing it to come and go as it pleases, both you and the bird will be happier. Life is just like that bird. Understanding no self helps us loosen our grip and enjoy life's moments with less worry and more ease. In daily life, this awareness helps us become kinder, more patient, and more compassionate. If someone says something hurtful, instead of feeling deeply wounded, we can see clearly that their words are temporary and we don't need to hold on to them. If things don't go exactly as planned, rather than getting angry, we recognize that change is natural and inevitable. Meditation is one practical tool Buddhism offers to help us realize this deeply. When we meditate, we watch our thoughts and feelings come and go, noticing their impermanence directly. Over time, meditation helps us become more peaceful and less attached. Even just a few quiet moments each day, breathing gently and observing your mind, can make a huge difference. Ultimately, the Buddhist understanding of no self doesn't take anything away from us. Instead, it gives us the gift of freedom to live each moment fully, without unnecessary fears or regrets, embracing life as it truly is. Section 8. Common Misunderstandings and Buddhist Responses. At this point, you might still have some questions or doubts. That's completely natural. Let's spend some time clearing up some common misunderstandings about Buddhism's teachings on rebirth and no self. One common question I often hear is, if there's no permanent self, does that mean Buddhism says I don't exist? It might sound funny, but it's a genuine concern many people have. Buddhism definitely does not deny your existence or your experiences. You absolutely exist, but not as something fixed or permanent. You exist in a changing, flowing way, shaped continuously by your experiences, actions, and conditions around you. Another common misunderstanding is that the teaching of no self means our lives lack meaning or purpose. But actually, Buddhism teaches exactly the opposite. Because nothing is fixed or permanent, every moment becomes incredibly precious. We have the power and freedom to shape our lives positively. Every action matters deeply because every action creates conditions for future happiness or suffering. This gives great meaning and purpose to everything we do. Some people also mistakenly think rebirth is just wishful thinking, meant to comfort us about death. But Buddhism's understanding of rebirth isn't about escaping reality. It's about deeply understanding reality, the reality of cause and effect, continuity, and impermanence. The Buddhist view of rebirth encourages us to take responsibility for our actions because we see clearly how they impact our lives and others, both now and in the future. Let me share a brief story. Once, a young student challenged an elderly Buddhist teacher, saying, "If there's no self, no soul, who exactly is reborn?" The old teacher smiled kindly and replied, "My child, when you see a rainbow, it appears beautiful and real, right, but can you hold it, keep it, or find exactly where it starts and ends? Our lives are like that rainbow, beautifully real, yet impossible to grasp tightly or permanently. It appears from conditions. And when conditions change, it disappears, only to reappear differently. This story reminds us gently that these teachings are not about losing something important. They're about understanding clearly, deeply, and compassionately how life truly works. They're about seeing through our misunderstandings and finding lasting peace and happiness. By clearing up these misconceptions, we open our hearts even wider to the wisdom Buddhism offers. The more clearly we understand these ideas, the more peacefully and happily we can live, day by day, moment by moment. Section 9, Historical and Modern Perspectives. Let's now take a little journey back in time and look at how these important teachings about no-self and rebirth have been explained throughout history. You know, sometimes it helps us to understand these profound teachings by looking at how different Buddhist masters and traditions have shared their wisdom across generations. In the earliest days of Buddhism, the Buddha himself explained these ideas gently and simply to his students. He often used stories and examples from nature to illustrate difficult concepts. Knowing that direct and easy-to-understand teachings could touch people's hearts deeply. For example, the Buddha once compared life and rebirth to the flame passing from one candle to another, as we discussed earlier. He taught his followers not to cling to ideas of permanence, encouraging them instead to observe their own minds, feelings, and bodies carefully. By doing this, they could clearly see that everything is temporary and interconnected. Over centuries, Buddhist scholars and teachers developed these teachings further. Theravada Buddhism. For example, the tradition practiced widely in countries like Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Myanmar has maintained a clear, practical explanation of rebirth and no-self. Theravada monks often teach their communities to meditate regularly, guiding them to experience firsthand the truth of impermanence and interconnectedness. They emphasize direct experience over complicated philosophy, making the teachings accessible and meaningful to everyone. In Mahayana, Buddhism common in countries like China, Japan, and Vietnam, the teaching of no-self and rebirth is often explained through beautiful and inspiring stories. Teachers encourage compassion, reminding us that understanding no-self helps us care deeply for others, because we see clearly that we're all interconnected. Mahayana teachings frequently highlight the importance of kindness, love, and generosity as practical ways to live wisely and create positive karmic conditions for future lives. Tibetan Buddhism, or Vajrayana, often explains rebirth and no-self through meditation and visualizations. Tibetan teachers help their followers deeply experience these truths in their minds and hearts. They emphasize using every moment in life, even difficult ones, as opportunities for spiritual growth. Understanding deeply that every experience is shaped by past karma and will shape future lives. Today, modern Buddhist teachers around the world continue this beautiful tradition of explaining these timeless truths in accessible ways. Teachers like Thich Nhat Hanh, the gentle Vietnamese monk, often spoke about interconnectedness as interbeing, emphasizing how deeply we depend on each other. He reminded us that when we truly understand no-self, our hearts naturally open wider with compassion. Other modern teachers, like the Dalai Lama, emphasize that understanding rebirth can encourage us to live ethically and kindly, knowing clearly that our actions affect others not just now, but in future generations. His simple advice to practice kindness and compassion daily shows us clearly how practical and relevant these teachings remain today. No matter the tradition or teacher, one message remains constant: understanding no-self and rebirth deeply and clearly brings us closer to peace, compassion, and wisdom. Section 10, Profound Insights, the ultimate purpose of understanding Anatta and rebirth. Now, as we approach the end of our journey together, let's explore the deeper meaning behind these teachings. Why is it so important to understand no-self, Anatta, and rebirth? What does Buddhism ultimately want us to see? At its heart, Buddhism is a path toward liberation and peace. It wants us to free ourselves from suffering not just temporarily, but deeply and permanently. But to achieve that liberation, we must first understand clearly what causes our suffering. According to Buddhism, suffering arises primarily from attachment. Attachment means holding tightly onto things we want to keep forever: our bodies, our loved ones, our possessions, even our ideas of who we are. But because everything changes and nothing stays forever, holding tightly causes us pain and disappointment. When we deeply understand that there's no permanent self, our grip naturally loosens. We realize that nothing can be permanently owned or controlled, not our health, our possessions, nor even our loved ones. Instead of feeling fearful or sad about this, we learn to appreciate every moment we have. Life becomes precious, meaningful, and joyful precisely because it's temporary. Understanding rebirth helps us see our lives in a broader perspective. It reminds us clearly that our actions today shape not just tomorrow, but many lifetimes ahead. Knowing this encourages us to live ethically and kindly, creating beautiful conditions for ourselves and for others. Every small act of generosity, patience, or compassion ripples out into the world, touching countless lives. The Buddha taught that fully realizing no self and understanding rebirth deeply leads to ultimate freedom, what Buddhists call nirvana. Nirvana is the state of peace and liberation achieved by letting go completely of attachment, anger, fear, and ignorance. It's a state of deep and lasting happiness. Let me share a brief story that captures this insight. Once, an elderly monk was asked by a young disciple, "Master, you've spent your whole life practicing Buddhism. What have you gained?" The old monk smiled warmly and replied, "My dear child, I have gained nothing, but I have lost anger, fear, anxiety, and the burden of attachment. Because of this, I am truly happy." This is exactly the purpose behind Buddhism's teachings of no self and rebirth, to help us lose the heavy burdens we carry, so we can live freely, joyfully, and compassionately. As you continue your own journey, remember these teachings clearly and gently. Allow them to guide you in moments of confusion or difficulty. Embrace the freedom that comes from deeply understanding no self and rebirth, and share this wisdom through your kindness, patience, and love each day. Conclusion: a journey of understanding and peace. As we come to the end of our journey together, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned. We've explored some truly profound teachings, the Buddhist understanding of no self, rebirth, karma, and consciousness, and discovered how these ideas can deeply transform our lives. Perhaps when we started with the idea of no permanent self felt puzzling or even a bit frightening. But as we've seen, this teaching isn't meant to unsettle us. Instead, it gently frees us from unnecessary attachments and worries. By understanding that our lives are continuously flowing and changing, like a beautiful river or a gentle candle flame passing from one candle to another, we learn to let go and appreciate each precious moment more deeply. We've also seen clearly how rebirth works in Buddhism, not as a soul jumping from one life to another, but as a continuation of our actions and energy. Every choice we make matters deeply, shaping not only our own future, but the lives of those around us. Understanding this inspires us to act kindly, compassionately, and wisely each day. Throughout history, Buddhist teachers from various traditions have shared these teachings in ways that touch hearts deeply. They remind us of the practical importance of kindness, patience, and compassion in everyday life. We heard inspiring stories of simple yet profound faith, reminding us that even small acts of generosity or understanding can ripple through many lifetimes. Today, these teachings remain just as meaningful and powerful as ever. They encourage us to live gently, openly, and thoughtfully. When we truly embrace the truth of impermanence and interconnectedness, we feel greater peace and freedom. Our worries soften, our hearts open wider, and our lives become filled with gratitude and joy. Finally, Buddhism teaches us something very beautiful. Our goal isn't to gain something external or permanent. Instead, it's to let go of suffering, fear, anger, and confusion. When we do this, we naturally experience peace and happiness, what Buddhism calls liberation, or nirvana. As you continue your personal journey, keep these teachings close to your heart. Live each moment mindfully and kindly, knowing deeply that your actions create your future. Remember, you are part of a beautiful, flowing stream of life, interconnected with all beings, continually changing and growing. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May these timeless teachings bring you lasting peace, deep understanding, and boundless joy every day.